I'm not a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts or demons until now. Yeah, stuff happens that can't be explained. But I just want you all to know that it took more than a couple of flying spoons or a door opening on its own to scare me out of my job. Since the department didn't find any reason to keep this police report confidential, I will now detail you everything I can on what happened on the scariest night of my life. We had just received word from dispatch to check out a noise complaint in a small neighborhood whose name I will not disclose for their privacy. It was me and my partner. Let's call him Paul, and I'll go by Mike. We arrived sometime after midnight. The street is dead. Everyone is sound asleep at this point. We park our patrol car in front of the aforementioned house and exit the vehicle. We knock on the door and let our presence known. Police. Is anyone home? A little girl, 8 to 10 in appearance, opens the door and peeks through the gap. Hey. I crouch to make myself less intimidating. Is your parent or guardian home? She shakes her head. My first thought was that she probably had the TV a little too high and woke up the neighbors. But before I could tell her to stay inside and lock the doors, I heard the sound of crashing silverware coming from what I presumed would be the kitchen. The entire house was nearly pitch black. The girl answering the door and shaking her head let me know she was alone. Which makes whoever made that noise an intruder as far as it concerns me. I asked the girl to step outside and turn to Paul. Paul, why don't you give her one of those lollipops you like to suck on when you're nervous? Paul gave me a cold stare as the girl giggled. They went to go wait by the car as I slowly pushed the door all the way open. Police, if there's anyone in this house, please let yourself be known. Without a warrant, I had no right to enter the building. I tried my best to spot whoever made the noise, but it is too dark to see. Just any sign of a threat, and I would be justified to search the house. But nothing. I left the door open and headed back towards Paul and the girl. Hey again, I don't think we introduced ourselves. I'm Officer Mike. This is my partner, Paul. If I may ask, what is your name? Maribel? That's a pretty name. So, Maribel? Again, if I may ask, where's your family? As soon as I had finished my sentence, the television in the living room turned on, volume fully up. Me and Paul quickly turned in surprise and could see the television playing static from outside. We put Maribel in the back seat of the patrol car for her safety, as no civilians were allowed in the front seats. We then, against our better judgment, enter the house. We tried every switch in the house, but no lights came on. While wandering the house cautiously, I would catch a person standing in the mirrors. I thought it was Paul, but every time I looked behind me, Paul was nowhere to be found. As I returned to the front door along with Paul, we both jumped as running footsteps echoed down the hall. We detached our firearms and aimed it at the source. The footsteps got louder and got closer. But no one ever appeared physically. Lamps, chairs, and other stuff started getting thrown around by an invisible force as the footsteps reached us. We sprinted out of the house and waited by the front yard. The footsteps seemed to stop, followed by the police siren that went off. I ran to the car and silenced the siren. I looked back at Paul, who seemed shooked. You all right, Paul? He takes a lollipop out of its package and puts it in his mouth. Yep. I opened the rear door and checked up on Maribel. You okay? She nodded her head, so I walked back to Paul. I don't know what to make of this, he said. Yeah, me neither. Ignore the running invisible man that knocked everything down for a second. All the family photos, pictures on the wall. He points at Maribel. She's not in any of them. So what are you thinking? The footsteps led outside. Then the siren goes off. There's a million buttons in that car. What are the chances? Paul, are you trying to tell me that Maribel is haunted? How do you explain what we just saw? I'm sure there's an explanation. The TV turns on when we take Maribel outside, prompting us to check it out. Someone or something shows up in the mirrors but ducks away. I remember wanting to shut him up, not because he wasn't making any sense, but because he was. I know you've seen it. It was prowling around. Then it runs outside and gets in the car, tries all the buttons. I think a ghost is trying to get to the girl. I just stood there, not sure what to say, until Paul decided to start walking back towards the house. "Paul, what are you doing?" "It only shows up in the mirrors. That's how we find it." I followed him inside and watched as he takes a book from the counter and breaks the nearest mirror. "What's the matter with you? That's someone's property." He takes a shard and hands another to me. It's not every day you get to arrest a ghost. We aimed our flashlights all over the house, waiting for something to appear in the broken glass. I recall praying to God Almighty to not let anything show up, but it did. It ripped right through my uniform, causing me to fall forward. I dropped the glass, which broke into smaller chunks. It continued clawing at my shirt and flesh, but stopped when Paul opened fire. I heard its screech fading as Paul helped me up. We both then hurried back outside to find Maribel missing from the back seat. It was difficult explaining what happened to the department without sounding like nut jobs. The police cameras who we were betting on to prove our stories had shut off the moment we entered the house. The thing, whatever it was, must have turned them off while we were unaware. The only part of our story that our police captain took seriously was the girl, Maribel. The captain brought up a missing person report and asked us if this was the girl we saw. It was. It's been just a few days since I gave up the badge to save whatever little pride I could spare. I just ask to whoever reads this and to whomever it may reach. The next time a door opens on its own, or things move by themselves in your home, check the mirrors. This happened back in the fall of 2016. I live in a very small and rural community where everyone knows everyone. The state that live in allows rifle mule deer buck hunting during the first week of October. Sustenance hunting is very important in the culture of my area. This fall, I was lucky enough to have drawn a buck tag. I had made plans to hunt on my grandmother's farm on this evening. Given that I am a smaller woman, I had asked my husband to go with me in case I killed something. He could help me pack it out. However, he could not go due to work obligations. Fine, no problem. I have hunted this farm many times by myself. I know it like the back of my hand. I strapped on my boots, grabbed my rifle and binoculars, tucked my cell phone into my pocket, and made my way to my Jeep. My grandmother's farm consists of corn, bordering an alfalfa field along a river. Between the river and the farm are lines of old growth trees. This is the perfect place to fill it a buck tag. I parked my Jeep about a mile upriver from the fields, then began walking along the tree line towards the area where the deer had mostly been feeding. At the opposite end of the field, there is a large haystack where all the harvested alfalfa is stored. As I saw it coming into my field of view, I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I kneeled down and viewed the area through my binoculars. I could see a very tall, large man walking briskly towards me from behind the haystack. I knew for a fact that I was supposed to be the only one hunting this farm on this night, as I had just spoken to my grandmother. Something inside me told me I needed to get out of the area as fast as I could. I initially tried to turn around and walk back down the trees to my Jeep. But given that I have such short legs, this guy was quickly closing the gap quickly. He was still several hundred yards from me, so I decided to try to cross the river instead. I found that the river was too muddy and deep for me to safely cross. I thought my only option was to attempt to get signal on my cell phone. When he walked across a small ditch and disparaged from my line of sight, I quickly darted into the corn and kept quiet. I could hear him walking closer and closer. I desperately tried to call my husband. Back then, the closest cell towers were over 30 miles away, and cell service was extremely spotty. I could not connect to my husband or 911. By this point, The man was within 100 yards of me. I could hear him ripping corn out, stomping around, and loudly cussing. Where the fuck did you go? Another issue is it was getting dark quickly. I definitely did not want to be in the dark alone with this man. I watched him for a few minutes and was able to determine that he did not have a gun. After weighing my options, I decided to step out and see if I could de-escalate the situation, as I work in healthcare and work with mentally unstable people all the time. I stepped out of the corn. "Hi, I'm sorry if I interrupted you hunt or something. I did not mean to cause any harm," I said with a sweet smile on my face. I made sure there was at least 80 yards of distance between us. His eyes locked with mine, and it was obvious there was something with this man. He stood about 6 feet 5 inches tall. His clothes were absolutely filthy, stained with what appeared to be his own waste and sweat. His shirt was torn and had dried blood on it. His face was crooked as if he had had a stroke prior, and he slurred his words. "There you fucking are," he yelled. He reached down and grabbed a massive stick. I'm talking a stick at least 5 feet long. He could have easily killed me with this stick. I stood my ground and grabbed my rifle from my back and pointed it at him. He stopped holding the stick. We looked at each other for a second when he began yelling. "Do you know whose farm you're on?" I stated, "Yes, this is my grandmother's farm. I've hunted it my whole life." The veins began to pop out of his head. "No, this is not. My wife is hunting in this cornfield and you ruined it. Because of you, she missed a huge buck, you stupid bitch." He became so enraged, he started making strange growling sounds and started spitting everywhere. I was running through the options in my head at this point when he suddenly started to lunge at me. I turned the safety off my rifle and loudly stated, "Stop, I will shoot if I have to." He froze in his tracks and just stared at me for about 30 seconds before dropping the stick. He grunted loudly with his eyes darting around. "Listen, I don't want to have to do something we will both regret. I am very sorry I ruined your hunt. If you turn around and walk away from me, I will leave." I calmly explained. I could see his thinking hard about what to do next when he mumbled, "Fine," and turned around, stomping back towards the haystack. My heart was about to beat out of my chest. I was not about to turn my back on this man, though. I watched until he walked distance away, and then I darted back into the corn. I thought back on how he said I spooked a massive buck and ruined his wife's hunt, but that did not make any sense. I had a good view of the whole field, and there were no deer present. I decided to observe him through my binoculars. I watched him climb up to the haystack and get into a small 2-door white car. He quickly peeled out of the haystack lot. I was able to catch that the car had California license plates, but nothing more. I live nowhere near California. He took off down the road, and he was alone. No one else was in that vehicle. I ran back to my Jeep and locked myself in it. I sped home as fast as I could and told my husband what happened. I had never seen this man in my life, and neither had my husband based off my description. We live in a community of about 200 people. Born and raised here, we know everyone. I called our local sheriff, and they came out and took a statement. I took them to the haystack where he was parked, and we found a knife lying on the ground. Of course, nothing could be done as I was not able to get a plate number or a name from the man. To this day, I still have no idea what the man's intentions were, even though I could guess on a few. It's been 8 years, and I've never seen this man again. I also decided that I'd be hunting with a buddy from then on.